relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today, I'm joined by Tim Campos. He is the CEO over at Woven. He's also the former CIO at a little-known company called Facebook. Tim, how's it going today, man?
Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Your time at Facebook is going to be something crucial to the conversation here. You were a part of a large push there that ended up doubling productivity for the Facebook workplace. And as we kind of unpack that story and talk about some of the myths and things we can think about improving our productivity in 2020 is what we're going to be really talking about today. But before we jump straight to that, give us a little bit of context. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to listeners and tell us a little bit about what you and the Woven team are up to these days, man.
Yeah, thanks for letting me do that. You know, for those people who don't know me, I the CEO of Woven, former CIO of Facebook. I was the CIO of another company before that. And really, just an even deeper understanding of who I am. My background is technology, software engineering, and I love the fusion of technology and business. That's one of the things that has really defined my career. And I have pretty much exclusively been in roles that use technology to enable the productivity of others, pretty much from the beginning of my career. So that's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. Woven, just as a brief introduction to the company, is a system that uses the calendar to help people spend time on what matters most. And we do that by making your existing calendar more intelligent and providing a bunch of superpowers, if you will, the things that your calendar cannot do. It really should, specifically designed to help you spend time on the things that you really want to spend time on.
I love it, man. I love that mission that you guys are going after. I've been quoted as saying, I sometimes just do what my calendar tells me to do. So the fact that you guys are bringing more intelligence there, and we're going to be having a conversation about, some of the things that we may be doing wrong and some tweaks that we can make to make ourselves more productive. I'd actually maybe like to start out there, Tim, talking about, maybe some of the myths that we tell ourselves or that we believe about productivity. I imagine there's probably going to be something here around multitasking, maybe some other commonly used terms that come up when we're talking productivity and getting more done. What are some of those that you think are commonly held and you guys are dispelling or you're speaking to a lot?
Yeah, I mean, so there's several. I mean, one, I think maybe start with a slightly obvious one. Productivity is not about working harder. And, a lot of people know that, but when they get down into the brass tacks, they kind of feel like, I've got to be productive today, so I'm going to work late, or I'm going to spend more time on something. But oftentimes that's not the issue. The issue is just looking at the environment that you're in. What other kinds of distractions do you have? Another thing is that, there are not all tasks are the same. So when we think about our productivity, we have to sort of break our lives down into, what I like to describe as maker time versus manager time. There's certain activities, tasks, there's been a ton of books written about this, that require deep focus. Not everything is like that. Approving an offer letter for a candidate that just got into my email doesn't require deep focus. I don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I need to do it. And I have a lot of little things like that come around. Those things basically affect my my ability to manage my life. That's why I call it manager time. But then there's the things that really make a huge difference in either my success or my organization's success or my company's success. Those often require focus, uninterrupted time, where that really important offer that needs to be approved actually gets in the way of me getting my pitch deck done for investors, or in putting together a big marketing campaign that we might be driving. So the more you can understand the difference between your tasks, those that are maker related and those that are more manager related, and structure your day so that you're doing the things that require a lack of interruption at a specific time of day where you've created that space for yourself, you can get a ton more done.
I like that. A lot, I think, has helped me in thinking about different tasks and categorizing them between urgent and important. We tend to think of those, 4 traditional boxes of urgent and important and the various stages there. But what you're saying is basically, you have that, but then layer on this other aspect, not forgetting about those, but then thinking about which ones require deep thinking and deep work, as Cal Newport puts it, and which ones are important, but just require, kind of, hey, I can do this in 3 minutes or less, sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And both are important, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously the unimportant, non-urgent tasks you just want to get rid of, but you can have important tasks that don't require thought. You can have important tasks that require deep thought, deep work, deep thinking. But you really need to treat those two things as very different. And it ultimately gets to how you schedule your time. The reality, forget the calendar for a second. The thing that defines us more than anything, it's not our titles, it's not our resumes, it's not the companies that we work at, it's how we choose to spend our time. And therefore, the most important decision that we can make is how we're going to spend and allocate our time. The challenge is that we all have the same amount of it, right? It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. You could be a project manager, you could be a product manager, you could be a head salesperson, marketing person, you could be the CEO of a giant company. We all have 24 hours in a day, and we're defined by how we choose to spend that time. And you can cheat. You can say, I'm not going to sleep as much, or I'm not going to work out, so I get more time to get more stuff done. Those things tend to be Pyrrhic. The better strategy, the strategy that defines the super successful, separate from the mediocre, is how people choose to spend and allocate their time.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you said. Being productive isn't getting more done in more time. It's getting more done in less time and getting the right things done. It's almost like you were listening to our episode that just dropped yesterday, where we were talking about health and keeping that as a priority, especially in high growth companies. We talked about, stop wearing busy as a badge of honor. So anyway, folks can go back one episode and check that out. Tim, as I think about the way that you guys are helping folks rethink the calendar and email are two things that just drive the modern workforce today. And, I heard a really great quote about email. I forgive whoever I heard this from, and I might not be able to quote it perfectly, but basically the idea is this, that your email is nothing more than a highly organized, easy to read to-do list given to you by other people. And to me, that kind of changed my thinking about email and always going to my inbox as the first thing that I do. Is there kind of a similar shift that you guys are talking to folks about when it comes to their calendar, time blocking, and how they approach their time when it comes to the calendar? Another key piece of knowledge work these days?
Yes. Well, let's go back and let's look at this genre of productivity software, because email and calendar both came to light at roughly the same period of time. They were digitized at the same time. Their precursors, however, were very different. So email is the electronic version of the memoranda, right? A memoranda is a very structured, formal document. I never worked in an environment like this, but anybody who worked in the 80s or the 70s, right? Memoranda is how people got stuff done. They would send these silly memoranda out. In today's day and age, however, the memoranda is kind of died as a mechanism, because as email became electronic, we were able to not only use this formal communication mechanism, but we could also use the exact same thing, because it's so easy to create an email, to do some silly small tasks like hey, yes, thank you, right? Thank you is one of the most common emails that is out there. or acknowledge, right? And that's not what memoranda was for. So email kind of is distorted just in its roots. It wasn't built for how people are using things today. And it's been, therefore, very easy for it to get corrupted in the way that you described. Now, the calendar, unfortunately, is not that much better. The one thing that the calendar has that's unique is that it contains time that you plan to spend, right? Email doesn't have the emails you are going to write. It has the emails that you are writing and all the emails that you wrote or other people sent to you, but it doesn't have your future in it. Your calendar does have a bit of the future in it, but people don't take advantage of that. We have a lot of events in Woven. We've got over 80 million events in the system. And one of the really interesting characteristics of these events is that over 50% of them were created within 3 days of the event actually happening. Over 70% were created within 7 days of the event happening. So that means that, for the most part, people don't use their calendar to think ahead, but you can. And this is one of the things that we're trying to change is if you think about the calendar as a planning tool, how are you planning to spend your time? It can help identify the conflicts or the issues that create trade-offs that require choice before you even get started on the task. Like, do I even have the time to volunteer at my kid's school? Like, what would I have to trade off to do that? When I put that into my calendar, I can see what that trade-off is, and then I can make that choice. Maybe I do want to do that. Maybe I don't want to do that. There's no good or bad to that, but the fact that I made the choice means that I'm being deliberate about it. Here's another factoid about the calendar, which gets back to your point on email. Over 60% of all events that are on our calendars were created by other people. So that means that we are allocating huge swaths of time to the request of others. And so one of the things that we're trying to change at Woven, the mission of the company, is we want to help people spend time on what matters most to them. That starts with them taking control of their time, being more in command of their time, being able to, being the ones that are making the choice of, whether or not they're going to spend time on one task or the other.
Man, that stat is really enlightening, and it goes back to that point about, one of the most important decisions that we make is how we spend our time, because we all have an even playing field there. So one of the things I want to get into you with, Tip, is how you were able to lead a charge that ended up doubling employee productivity at Facebook, and get into some of the strategies and tactics that you uncovered and helped execute there. Give us a little bit of backstory. How did that come to be? How did you end up, being charged with improving employee productivity at Facebook?
Well, this is my first question. When I was being interviewed by Mark Zuckerberg, my first question to him was, what do you expect out of this role? What's my job? It's one of the things I learned having been a CIO at other companies and knowing a lot of other CIOs, that one of the problems that companies have with their technology departments is they don't really know what they want them to do. They know what they don't want them to do. They don't want them to screw up. They don't want the data to get lost. They don't want security breaches, but they generally don't know what they want them to do. And the best companies do. Zuck was very clear about this. He didn't spend a bunch of time thinking about it. He didn't muddle around. He immediately got to the answer, which is, I care about the productivity of the company, about particularly engineers, but really every single role in the company. I want people to, be able to get as much done as they can with the least amount of effort. And that's what I'm expecting out of this. So that's what basically gave me the charter. I took that to heart. This is something that I championed all throughout my tenure at Facebook, almost 7 years. Now, the second thing that in terms of how do you measure this, right? Because you can't improve things you don't measure. And there's a ton of different ways to measure productivity. When we talk about doubling productivity, essentially what we're talking about there is revenue per employee. Now, there's other measures where we did probably far better, profit per employee. But the things that are actually most actionable is when you start breaking down the job function. Let's say I am a recruiter, right? So how many hires can I recruit in a given year, right? Or sourcers, how many candidates can I identify in a given week? These are more actionable productivity measures because they break down into what what's the actual job? And so for most people, when they're starting to think about their own productivity, if they can break their job down into the major tasks, what is it that defines who I am and what I do? And what's the measure there? Then you can start thinking about, okay, well, where are the long poles in here? Where are the parts that take the most time? And you want to look for those things that have a lot of repetitive activity. That's the automation opportunity. And this is basically what we did over and over and over again at Facebook. Initially, we did this by, hey, let's just use traditional software. But we got to the point where we were so good that the only way to make the company even more productive was to start building that software ourselves. And so that's basically what my organization became, is a full-on engineering product organization where we were building next generation workforce products to help the company become more productive on everything from how do we talk to customers, to how do we book meetings, to how do we repair the equipment in the data centers. Like we just built tons and tons of automation.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know we're big proponents of putting out original, organic content on LinkedIn. But one thing that's always been a struggle for a team like ours is to easily track the reach of that LinkedIn content. That's why I was really excited when I heard about Shield the other day from a connection on, you guessed it, LinkedIn. Since our team started using Shield, I've loved how it's let us easily track and analyze the performance of our LinkedIn content without having to manually log it ourselves. It automatically creates reports and generates some dashboards that are incredibly useful to see things like what content's been performing the best and what days of the week are we getting the most engagement and our average views per post. I'd highly suggest you guys check out this tool if you're putting out content on LinkedIn. And if you're not, you should be. It's been a game changer for us. If you go to shieldapp.ai and check out the 10-day free trial, you can even use our promo code B2B Growth to get a 25% discount. Again, that's shieldapp.ai, and that promo code is B2B Growth. All one word. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah. I love those first two that you mentioned, because I think that's applicable whether, as you said, you're a recruiter, an engineer, a salesperson, a marketer. Also really great advice for not only CIOs, but I think that applies to marketing and sales leaders is, they come in and asking the CEO or whoever they're reporting to, what does success look like here, right? Because if there aren't level expectations, then how are you going to meet those? And that translates into what you're talking about in productivity, because what I heard you say there, Tim, is, whether you have, how many employees were at Facebook at this time?
When I started, it was pretty small. It was about 1,400 people.
Okay. Well, I mean, case in point there, whether you have 14 people, 1,400 or 14,000, these two actionable pieces that you just mentioned, figure out how you want to measure productivity. And that might change a little bit over time. And as you mentioned, there might be a couple different ways to slice it, but start with something. And then two, start to look for areas of slack, start to look for areas of potential automation. Once you've kind of started down that road, there's some other tactical things that you employed at Facebook that other leaders could look at within their organization, either, how to look at the slack or how to determine when to automate, when not to, those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the when to automate and where to automate is probably one of the trickiest part of a technology leader's job. And it starts with figuring out what you can actually automate. And, so a lot of business functions, when you're talking about marketing or sales, involve human interaction with people. These are not very good things to automate, right? Because unless you don't care about the relationship, that business practices where your success is defined by your ability to influence somebody else, requires you to build up and maintain a relationship with them. And that stuff takes time, and time with people is actually a good thing. So I'll give you a practical example, which a lot of companies have been screwing up on, is support, customer service. It sucks when your customers have problems with your product, but every time you have an opportunity to touch them and talk to them, it's an opportunity to build a better relationship with them. And at Woven, I can guarantee you our product has not been perfect, but the opportunities to talk to our users has been invaluable, not just for us, but also for them. They start to feel more ownership on the success of the product, that they're helping us. And so that's not a good place to introduce a bot or some kind of AI thing to streamline the support process. On the other hand, we can't be answering support emails 24 hours a day. So if we can at least tell people right away that, hey, we're not here, but we'll get back to you right away. Or if you want to press this button, it will escalate the issue to us and we will try to deal with your issue immediately. That's a good area of automation, because the alternative is a frustrated user. So these are tricky things that take time to sort of understand. Another thing is that technology is evolving quite a bit. There's a lot of different ways that you can use technology now to automate a process that wasn't possible before. In the past, you'd have to write software, you'd have to code in order to do, and so that basically cut out a lot of different business functions. If I'm a salesperson, I'm not a software engineer. If I was a software engineer, I would have gone into software engineering and not sales. So I don't want to spend a bunch of time, learning all this cryptic language in order to automate my job. But in today's day, you've got things like Zapier and little rules that you can write, or tools like Woven, which make it really easy to start customizing and automating different parts of your job. And so there's just a lot more opportunity to use technology. I think the third thing that's an interesting opportunity here is not to forget the automation when it comes to decision making, right? And the most valuable thing here is like, what information do you need to make a decision, and how do you get that data to you when you need it? A great example is for salespeople. Which customer should I call first? Because most people have a book of business. They got like 10 or 15 customers, sometimes hundreds of them. But if you have good data to say, this customer wants to hear from you right now, certainly more important than this other one that maybe if you call them is not going to lead to much, that can help save huge amounts of time. And so this was one of the areas that we spent a lot of time on within Facebook, is what data do we have that will help people within the company make better decisions, whether that's for sales, which customer should they talk to, or for recruiters, which candidates should they talk to, which candidates are most likely to be successful when we put them through something like a phone screen or a test. And, we could use data to help them with some of those decisions.
Yeah, I love that point about decision making, because not only does it save time, but there's also a psychological benefit, right? I've heard people talk about decision fatigue, and actually, quote, not quote, but point to Mark Zuckerberg as an example of this. The reason that he always wears, the same color shirt, because that's not a decision that should need to take up mental space when you're running such a large company, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, he's very deliberate about the decisions that he wants to make. The clothing example is a great one, but an even more scalable example of this is how he chooses what his job will be versus the job of others. And, he's not the kind of leader to say, okay, I know everything about everything. So when the marketing person comes in, I'm going to spend half my time telling them how to run their job. Quite the opposite. He's like, look, I'm an engineer and a product guy. Those are the things that I'm going to spend all my time on. I'm not a salesperson. I am not a marketing person. I'm going to find the best candidate I can to go run that. Hire somebody like a Sheryl Sandberg, and I'm going to let them do their job. And the conversation with them isn't going to be about me telling them what to do. It's going to be about them telling me what they need from me. And if they don't need anything from me, awesome. Let's just, touch base every once in a while on how things are going, but I'll stay focused on the things that I need to. And that is a much more scalable leadership practice than, the typical sort of leadership style that a lot of people employ, where they feel like, leadership is this position of respect and they have to protect that. And therefore they got to be the smartest person in the room and they got to tell everybody else what to do. And it's really not what it's about.
Yeah, people see through that all the time. One of the things that I love that Craig Groeschel always says on his leadership podcast is people would rather follow a leader who's always real than one who's always right. And I've been in different sorts of working environments with different sorts of leaders, the ones that felt like they had to protect that either from an ego perspective or a self-preservation perspective, because they thought that I'm going to lose respect if I utter the words I don't know, or if I look like someone, underneath me in the pecking order bring something to the table. But I've respected and seen the most productive leaders ask good questions of the subject matter experts on their team for what they think and what their experience has been and what they think they should do going forward, whether that's a product leader, a marketing leader, whatever the case might be. Tim, as we kind of round out the conversation here today, anything else on, kind of tactical things from your time at Facebook or just everything as you've delved into the world of productivity? I think about, I hear recommendations from folks about, blocking your time. You make some good points about, if you say you're going to do it, put it on your calendar ahead of time. And those stats about how often stuff is on our calendar from other people and the last minute, I think, speak to some pretty big areas of opportunity, some low-hanging fruit. Any other low-hanging fruit for folks as they look to how can I, double my productivity or even just make it 5% better?
Let's talk about the calendar, because I actually think this is one of the most powerful areas of opportunity for people is, as I said before, taking more deliberate control over how you plan and allocate your time. And so, time blocking, as we discussed before, is a great mechanism to ensure things get done, whether that's time blocking for an activity you're doing with others, that's a meeting, or time blocking for yourself. That, when you reserve time to work on that presentation, you're going to be in a much better position to get it done than if you just say, okay, I'll do it when I'm free, especially if you are in a leadership position or a role where there's a lot of other people who have demands of your time. But the second thing another thing that's really interesting to understand, we all have kind of a normative meeting load and a meeting schedule. So, for me at Facebook, it was probably about 30 hours a week of meetings that I typically had. In my current role, it's a little bit less, but it's about 25 hours of meetings. Now, when I look out into the future, I don't always know what those things are going to be, right? So, 3 weeks from now, I don't have 30 hours of meetings scheduled on my calendar, but I'm going to. I just don't know what they are yet. And when you understand this, then it helps you think differently about giving away that time, because often, what ends up happening when people are trying to schedule time with each other, if you just push it far enough in the future, the answer is always yes, sure, I'm totally free 2 months from now. But that doesn't mean that you should take the event, right? If you're doing what I like to call portfolio management of your time, you're saying, I want to spend 10% of my time on one-on-ones with my team. I want to spend 30% of my time with customers. I want to have 40% of my time in deep work. You got to kind of build your calendar that way so that it looks like that even ahead of time, to remind you when you're making these decisions, do I really want to take this meeting during this period, even though it's far out in the future and I look free? That's probably one of the hardest things. And one of the things we're trying to really enable with Woven through analytics and templates and the ability for people to mark up and describe their time more effectively so they can do a better job of allocating out in the future. And then one last thing, which I'll add is, the calendar. This is one of the biggest differentiators for Woven is we're making the calendar more of an active tool. Today, it is a passive tool. Like you decide to schedule by doing work over email or text messaging, and then you put the calendar event on the calendar. And then later on, somebody will send the document out that's relevant for that meeting via email, right? So here's the agenda for the meeting, or here's the interview, the resume for the candidate. The problem with all that is that your information just gets dispersed all over the place, and you end up spending a huge amount of time, particularly if you're busy, just on the context switch. I'm going into this event. What are we doing here? What's our purpose? What's our reason to be? And so we're making the calendar more of an active thing. Not only is it easier for Woven events to get scheduled because they understand the difference between like a dinner time meeting and a lunch meeting, but they can include information like, here's the agenda for our event, or here is the action items that we want to discuss. And that type of using the calendar that way, we find provides an enormous productivity benefit for people, because the actions are tied to the allocation of time. The things that they need to do, the things that they need to discuss, the decisions that they need to make are now tied to that allocation of time. And if they reallocate their time, if they move this meeting, or they move the time that they're going to do that presentation, all that information moves along with it so that it's there at the time that is necessary.
Man, that is so good. For anybody listening to this, you might have to hit the 60-second back a couple times to start from, the top of those 3 recommendations that Tim just dropped. But man, I identified with all of those really well. Time blocking for yourself. I've started to do that. I've got some stuff after this interview that I have blocked because I knew that if it kept getting pushed, right? And my coworker kept asking me, hey, when are you going to get that done? I'm like, okay, I give him a deadline of when I'm going to get it done. And I put it on the calendar. So now I have that forcing function, just like I've got to show up to do this interview with you, right? And we need to do more of that. The second one, I really love this idea of portfolio management and looking at percentage of time for different buckets that you want to allocate your time, right? Like if you're in sales, how much time is spent actively talking to customers? And how much time is spent doing administrative work? How much time is spent with current customers? Those sorts of different things, because you're exactly right. If someone, I have a hard time saying no anyway, but if someone asks, hey, can we get 15 minutes on the calendar 2 months from now? Most of us are going to say yes, but that contributes to it. And when you change the thinking of, I have 10% of my time to dedicate to this type of thing, and this is going to eat into it. Even though it's 2 months from now, do I still want to do that? And what you talked about there in context switching as part of a remote team to where my calendar is now much more back to back to back to back than when I was in a regional sales role and it was, okay, there's drive time and things. That context switching is a huge thing. So this has been a really fun conversation, Tim. It's given me some ideas to think about how I manage my own time going into the new year. I imagine there are going to be a lot of people listening to this who want to ask you some follow-up questions or go deeper on this topic, maybe follow some content you're putting out on this topic as well. What's the best way for them to reach out or stay connected with you or learn more about Woven if they're looking at something like that for their team right now?
Yeah, so to learn more about the company, we're easy to find. You just search for Woven, whether that's on Google, the Apple, Mac, Windows app stores, or you can just go to woven.com. But I love the discussion. So I'm easy to find on Twitter. My Twitter handle is tcampos, and send me a note, drop me a message, drop me a line, tell me what you think.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tim. I really appreciate you being a guest on the show. I think this was really timely as folks are looking out how to improve in a very key area. As you put it, the big differentiator that we have is the decisions we make about our time. And you made some really compelling cases on how we can take more control of that, right? So thank you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been really fun. I really enjoyed your questions.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.